I've never wrestled on Thanksgiving, which is good. I never really wanted to wrestle on the holidays, and I know a lot of times people always said, like, oh, cool, the Survivor Series was this, or what are families going to do? They're just going to sit around. So I noticed people run Wednesday and people run Black Friday. So the one match that I did have that was Black Friday weekend was actually the TLC match, TLC with North Star Express and the Phoenix Twins. And the funny story about this is how my weekend went. First of all, if you haven't seen this match or you aren't familiar with it, now it's 15 years ago. It happened in 2008. One of my favorite feuds I've ever done in pro wrestling was with the Phoenix Twins, the way that we built it for almost a year. And even though the booking tried to derail it and go a different direction, it ended up coming back to us and ended up being the blow-off, which was great. We had this awesome match. It's a match I'm very proud of TLC-wise, but it's also one that I jokingly say that it took like years off my career. Not years, but maybe at least a few dozens of matches off my career, because the bumps in it were insane, and like I got busted open. And if you know, before one of the first major scars that I had was a scar in the middle of my forehead from the TLC match, and the first one I was ever in, I got hit with a ladder, and so I had this bump, and now I refer to it as like my Harry Potter scar. But the reason what made it bigger is I got sabooed with a chair, but it was upside down, and the lip ripped my scar off my face in this match. And the reason I share that is because on this story, not only did we have this really epic match, but so on Wednesday night after I was done with work, I went and drove home and to Detroit Lakes, and I spent Thanksgiving with the family in Detroit Lakes, and then came back to St. Cloud. And then we got in the car on Black Friday. And by the way, I was working retail at this time, so the idea that I got retail off on Black Friday is insane. I know people weren't happy with it, but also that job sucked. So that's the thing. So if you ever are like, what are some of the sacrifices you make? It was one of this part-time retail job. That was one. So we drove all the way to Chicago. We do the show, and then I have to come back. And ultimately, I believe... I think the reason for coming back on this one, I want to say I had a family thing on Saturday, or maybe it was like it was my grandpa's birthday, I believe, or something like that. So I had to go all the way up to Detroit Lakes, all the way down to Chicago, got beat up, banged up in a TLC match, also had this cut, and it wouldn't stop bleeding. And so at the time, before that we became in this enraged feud that I've had with Canon for way too longer than I can remember. But, you'll hear me sometimes talk about the Beloit Travel Plaza. In the Beloit Travel Plaza, a lot of times what I do is I will stop there and, just fill up with gas because it's the cheapest option or whatever. Well, in this particular time, luckily they had super glue and, ointment to like whatever it was to clean it out, and Band-Aids. And so I was able to go, and we got there at like I think 3 or 4 a.m. and was able to get Canon ended up in the bathroom stall super gluing this cut, and it actually came together better than the first cut. But like I remember sitting there being like, well, you know who your true friends are when you're sitting in a sitting in a bathroom at 3:45 having your head glued so that it actually stops bleeding. And and then I made it home for that, and I can't even remember if I did anything Sunday, but it was a ving, 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 and those are the travels that make the holidays interesting. And as I've gotten older or more more status, I guess, in wrestling, I've decided that it's not in my best interest to try and make those trips. This one, again, I only have the one event that's close to home, and I'll gladly take that as my only event, but trying to rush and get elsewhere is tough unless it's worth it. So, but yeah, the TLC match, again, I talk about the TLC match pretty extensively in general on my Patreon, but as far as a little bit, this answer was B. The TLC was what I did on Black Friday.